Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Daily Word. Today's Monday, January 17th. Glad you could join me for our few minutes together as we continue our journey through the Daily Word. A little snowy and icy outside, and that's one of the reasons that I'm at home today. I don't trust my legs to keep me upright, and so I thought it was just safe to be home for this morning, and then we'll see what the afternoon brings. And you can still hear I still got a little bit of this frog in my throat. And so I didn't want to give that to Betsy in the office. And so I'm just going to stay home this morning and see how that all plays out. So glad you could join me for our time together as we begin a new week in the month of January. So chosen for this morning from 1 Chronicles chapter 29 verse 15. 1 Chronicles chapter 29 verse 15. And we hear these words. We are foreigners and strangers, as were all our ancestors. Our days on earth are like a shadow, and there is no abiding. So there are lots of places in Scripture that talk to us about the brevity of life. We are called to number our days. We're called to know that, we're kind of like the chaff, the wind comes and blows us away, that we should live our lives fully. And one of the fascinating things about Scripture, as it deals with time and how time plays a part in all of our lives, is that there is no abiding in time. We're often, and I have thought about this too, we often like to plant ourselves in the moment, and just stare. They're kind of like on Transfiguration Sunday, when Peter, James, and John are with Jesus and Moses and Elijah. They wanted to build tents and just stay there in the moment because, often our lives are best when we can stay in a certain moment and we can revel in it. But it doesn't work that way. Time, as we all know, time marches on. There is no abiding. One step leads to another. One season, one circumstance, one setting. It kind of bleeds into the next. That means there's also, of course, no abiding in the circumstances of our lives. We don't abide, we move on. I talked about it yesterday a little bit in my sermon about Jesus changing the water to wine and how important that moment was. But that, for all that we know about it, and for all that we celebrate about it, that was a moment. And in that moment, of course, the disciples began to see who Jesus was. Those around began to wonder who Jesus was. And he made a difference for the moment in the lives of the people gathered. It would have been interesting to hear the conversation between the caterer and the bridegroom after the fact, when the best wine came out. It'd be interesting to hear what that conversation was about. But instead we know that these moments of changing water to wine, these moments of our lives that move us, we don't abide in them, but they mean something for us. They are, if you will, stepstones in the next part of our journey. We are transient beings. Excuse me. We're transient beings. Scripture says we're foreigners and strangers, as were our ancestors. We are transient beings. Time makes that inevitable. We're carrying our passports, if you will, from one kingdom to another. Time marches on, and we know it full well. But truth and Scripture and God remain in us. Circumstances as well. They're not our home. They are terrains along the passage of time. They give us some context in life, of course, but they're not the eternal things in us. We're reminded that in our lives, ourselves, our situations, our circumstances, our choices, we live these transient lives. We don't get, to abide, but we move on. And I think that's the important thing about this scripture as a reminder to me, and frankly, as I thought about what yesterday's scripture meant to us. I said yesterday in my sermon that I'm well aware, and I'm okay with the fact that I have more days behind me than ahead of me. I understand that. It happens to all of us. But here's what I know about my life and the way that God calls me to live it. We don't just stay in the moment. God in us, Jesus at the wedding in Cana, changed water to wine. Lives were changed. And then Jesus and the disciples moved on. It's true, at the end of Jesus' life, when they're all hiding in the upper room, and then after the resurrection and after Pentecost, they didn't stay in those moments, but then Jesus sent them out in their lives to make a difference in the world. They didn't get to abide in that moment. And in their grief and in their heartache, they didn't get to abide. They were summoned, if you will, to move on. And for us, I believe that's true as well, that we have to take every single moment given to us and know that we too, in our lives, are foreigners and strangers, as were all of our ancestors. And our days are like a shadow. We don't abide. But in all of the days of our lives, 57 for me, whatever it is for you, God abides in us and moves in us and takes us from one place to the next. Yesterday when we showed all those wedding pictures, it was so fun to see all those. And it's true that some of us don't look like that anymore. We've aged, we put on some weight, we have less hair than we did. In my wedding picture, I had a big beard. We saw all those pictures, and there was some laughter, and for me, there were some tears, and I officiated 8 of those weddings that were on the screen yesterday, and I could tell you a story about all 8 of them if we had time for that. And of all 8 of those weddings, as I look at them now, they didn't just stay in that moment, but life progressed. Many of them now have kids, and they have changed jobs, and they live in different places now. For us, for Diane and I, we talked about it just the other day. We have, in the last 4 years, have 3 grandsons, and we have 2 more grandchildren on the way, Kelsey and Mindy. And we're so excited, and we talked about it on the way home. And we thought, 4 years ago, or even for us, our anniversary this year will be 33. Even for us, we never thought about any of this happening. But now it's so exciting, and we live and we treasure each moment, knowing that we too are just sojourners. We're just foreigners and strangers, and we live our life to the best that we can. And I know you all feel that as well. And so I think the word for us in this text today is that we should remember to not dwell in the moment, whether it's a high mountaintop experience or one of the lowest moments of our lives. We shouldn't dwell there, but the circumstances, we're called to move on. And I believe, as I said yesterday, that Jesus continues in us, in you, and in me to change our water into wine. And not cheap wine, but expensive, extravagant wine that changes the party completely. And he continues to do that right where we are in our lives. And friends, that is such good news for us as we begin a new week, and as we are halfway through the month of January. Let's remember that there is no abiding, but God in us changes our water to wine and asks us to use it, to change the lives of others around us. And I think when we do that, we honor the presence of God in our lives. So, thanks for joining me this morning. Thanks for always being present with me. Remember that you and I were foreigners and strangers, as were all of our ancestors. Our days on earth are like a shadow, and there is no abiding. We simply abide in God. And that's good news. So know of this presence of God in your lives today. Know of God's love for all of you. Know of my love for you. Stay home if you can. It's apparently pretty slippery out there. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Have a great day.